Hi, guys. If you're a subscriber, thank you. If you're not, I hope you'll subscribe and tell your friends so we can keep doing this. Just hit that little button that's really helpful. So here we are after our Wisconsin victory, where Elon Musk and his gazillions of dollars that he invested to try and buy that election for Trump and his hand-picked Supreme Court justice, well, they lost, and Susan Crawford won instead. And that's what we wanted. So what does this do? It shows that these people are not invincible, despite the best backing and training by Vladimir Putin and all of the cheating, the blatant lawlessness. It didn't work this time. And in two very safe Republican House seats in Florida, where they had special elections, yes, the Republican won, but by a lot less than Trump won those districts last year. It's important to take note of small victories. And we've talked about this before, not just because it makes us feel better, although it does. And sometimes we need just something to hang on to. But we're seeing real results now after kind of being stuck for a couple of months, kind of in disbelief that he was doing these things that he's been doing. So on the heels of Cory Booker's incredible marathon speech where he broke Strom Thurmond's record, um, I'm going to look at what our friend Aaron Rupert flagged this for us. And as part of what Cory Booker said on the Senate floor, he says, I confess that I have been imperfect. I confess that I've been inadequate to the moment. I've confessed that the Democratic Party has made terrible mistakes and gave a lane to this demagogue. I confess we all must look in the mirror and say we will do better. Well, I think that that's true. And I think that's why we have so many independent journalists and podcasts and YouTubers and, doing what we're doing here because people are tuned in on a daily basis. They're not just clicking on the TV to see what's there. We no longer trust our media. MSNBC still does a good job, but, they've been curbed a lot, as we know. They're in the profit-making business. So they got to do what they got to do. So I'm finding that independent journalism and real people out there matter. I think the most important thing is that each one of you, anybody, even if this isn't what you do for a living, it's just you're concerned about your country, even if you've never been an activist before, and maybe you don't even think of yourself that way. I think I've shared with you that my friends, a lot of my friends who have never worked in politics, maybe they vote, but they've never been all that involved, are now making this a very important part of their life. So we have uh, our local protests coming up here on the weekend, April 5th, as we have in every state capital and in Washington, D.C. And I think we're going to all be very pleasantly surprised at the turnout because now people are no longer just regular, everyday people from all walks of life are no longer saying, I tend to keep politics separate, or my friends are MAGA, but we don't talk politics. And that's how we all get along when we have dinner or go on trips together, or you'll see each other at the country club, that sort of thing. And so I think people understand the historical moment we are in. And that's what Senator Cory Booker was trying to tell us, that even if we feel like we've fallen short, and I think many people do. I mean, let's face it. We gave money. A lot of people gave money to grifters who didn't really have our best interests at heart. The people who were building their generational wealth and pocketing the money by putting clever ads on Twitter and then not really using the money to elect Democrats. They all got rich, tens of millions of dollars that did not go to elect Democrats. And the clever tweets from people where it sounds good, but just because you were once married to a political strategist, if you yourself have never made a living as a political strategist, you shouldn't be giving political advice. You can encourage people, you can still have your clever tweets, but you're not the expert. And too many people felt that they were getting expert advice just because someone has a lot of Twitter followers because of a famous last name. If you spent your life as a corporate lawyer doing mergers and acquisitions, you really have no business on TV talking about what happened, what former federal prosecutors were telling us what can happen, what's going to happen, and keeping us clued in on DOJ and all of the crimes regarding Trump and his criminal cohorts. Sometimes there would be lawyers on TV that really had no business doing it, or people with a lot of Twitter followers that no one ever heard of before, stepping up and telling us, that Merrick Garland is dotting the I's and crossing the T's. He wasn't. He was selling us out. That, in my opinion, as we look back on this, was probably the most egregious part of the last few years of the resist movement. Some of us were in it for real. Even if it hurt, we had to be honest about these things. But when there were other people protecting Merrick Garland, because that's how they got their fame and fortune, um, that's unconscionable. Let's not let that happen again. Even if somebody is a big name on TV, sometimes it's those independent journalists who are coming up with the information that we need, with the truth. So I think we're getting smarter. And as Cory Booker said, sometimes we've fallen short, but we learn from our mistakes. But now we can't really afford to make any more mistakes. So, like I said, I see more and more people getting more public, being more involved. They're no longer keeping their politics private. Maybe they were anti-Trump, but they're now joining in on social media, which I think is important. Not because you're like, nah, 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 our side won, but you're letting the MAGA in your life know that this is no longer acceptable or tolerable. Now that we know what Trump is doing, you can't say, well, I really like his position on X. It's like, well, what about we're going to invade Greenland, or the tariffs with Canada, or just take Canada and make it a state? What about deporting people who are here legally? What about getting rid of your grandma's Social Security? Okay. On and on and on it goes. Eliminating all Black history and the accomplishments and the contributions of Black Americans. It gets to the point where this isn't just about politics, okay? Uh, it's good to let people know this is no longer acceptable in terms of our relationship as friends or same community, whatever. Um, a lot of these folks are out and out threatening those of us who are not MAGA. That is not acceptable. And so you can't say, well, as long as they're nice to me, it's okay. Or they're great in every other area of their life, except for that MAGA stuff. MAGA now is something very different than it was in 2016 or 2020. And I do see more and more people taking responsibility in their own life, not just by contacting their Republican members of Congress to keep their feet to the fire, or letting Democrats know when they are disappointed in them, but going to these events. And again, being very public. I think a lot of people were just too intimidated before. And they were hoping that this would all go away and life would go back to normal. But now you're looking at the world that your children and grandchildren are going to live in, and they're not going to have what we had because we already let so much of it go. We whiffed on the Mueller report. We let Merrick Garland get away with doing nothing, and the insurrection went through, and these people are now part of Trump's army. The illegalities, the crimes, the dismantling of our Constitution, the treason, and to handing over. It looks like not just handing over Ukraine to Putin, but Greenland right up there by Canada, and then Alaska and Canada. He needs the Arctic passageways. He needs all the oil up there. Literally, that whole part of the planet Trump is handing over to him. When we say this, we mean it. So I like the fact that Claire McCaskill was on Morning Joe, and she said, a lot of Republican senators are really kind of glad and happy and relieved that Elon Musk lost in Wisconsin, that it can be done, that despite him publicly flouting his illegality because he can get away with it because he's Elon Musk, and he can do that now in this era of Trump, despite the millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars that he spent and bribed and gave away, which was a bribe, he still lost. So it can be done. And I think that we need to hang on to these little victories, again, not to make us feel better, but to know that it is possible and to know kind of what it's going to take. So go to find the closest protest rally that you can this weekend on the 5th. We have one in my small town. I'm moving to Washington, D.C. shortly, and so I'll start going to events there. But every state capital is having them. It's worth it to go. And here's what's important. Don't just go. Go and take photographs. Go and take videos and put it up on your Facebook. Do it proudly and let people know where you stand, and serve as an example to your children, your grandchildren, and others, so that they know that if we want to save our democracy, we have to fight for it. Because frankly, folks, I don't think we really did before. We let this happen, unfortunately. And I think that's what Cory Booker was talking about. Too many people wanted to be entertained, or they wanted people to tell them what they wanted to hear, and or they thought somebody else would take care of it. And when Nancy Pelosi, when she declined to impeach Trump over obstruction of justice in the Mueller report, she said, he's not worth it. We'll let the voters take care of it. Well, he was president, and he was a dangerous criminal, as we now know, dangerous with Putin. And we didn't stop him because we were too afraid. We didn't want to bother with it. It was uncomfortable. And it was not up to the voters to stop it then. It was up to Democrats. Well, it was up to the Congress. We knew Republicans wouldn't. Actually, I do think that if the House had decisively impeached Trump and it was done with some Republican votes, I do think that the Senate would have convicted him at that early stage. There were enough establishment non-MAGA types still serving where it could have been done. So we have screwed up. We have let these things happen. And don't say, well, Mitch McConnell, we expect Mitch McConnell to be corrupt. Okay. I'm talking about Democrats and independents and never Trumpers. Okay. Too many people got rich off of fake fighting Trump, taking your money and pocketing it. And they literally have the Democratic House majority sitting in their bank accounts from the grifting. We do. We didn't stand by people who were standing up to the Trump and the Trumpers, and when they got hit and smacked down. Too many Democrats and never Trumpers kind of stood back because they didn't want to get the blood splattered on them, and they didn't help the people. I was one of those people that kind of got left out there bleeding in the street. They rewrite the rules, and they started creating their own little, I don't know, self-important groups and cliques surrounding this that were more about, again, the clicks and what everybody could get out of it than about the mission of fighting Trump. So I'm noticing that the independent people, they aren't big names or whatever, and independent journalists, people with podcasts and YouTube channels and putting the truth out there. Tony Michaels, I'm a big fan of Tony Michaels, the Rush Limbaugh of the left, and my friend, Cliff Schechter, Amy Siskin. I mean, on and on and on. I don't want to list all the names, and I don't want to miss anybody, but there's regular people out there who have not been sanctioned by any group, but who are out there doing their thing and doing it very, very well. There's actually something to be said to not owing anybody anything. Like, oh, if I don't go along with this, then this group over here that's now banded together and has, super PAC or has money they're throwing around, they might not help me out. Um, mm, it does happen. That gets icky. Kind of the longer this era goes on, those things kind of start happening. People start selling out just a little bit. But I like what I'm seeing now. And um, I don't think it's the same vibe as during the election. I think during the election cycle, we thought Kamala would win. We could not fathom the country doing what they've done. Although I do think Trump cheated. There's a whole Starlink thing. But again, Democrats did not fight this stuff or investigate it or demand recounts. We cannot let this happen anymore. And it's going to be we the people. And I hope that doesn't sound too corny. But now that we know that we can make a difference when we join together, now that we know, then we got to keep doing it. I keep saying that it's going to have to be the Republicans that save us. We're seeing signs that there are some Republicans that will stand up to Trump. But you know what else? I think they need to know that they've got enough people behind them, that the people, their MAGA base may be the loudest, but their MAGA base live in our towns and our communities. And that MAGA base needs to know that we don't tolerate this anymore. We're not tolerating fascism and lies and human rights violations. This isn't just politics anymore. And I think more and more people are understanding that it's different now, and we will be different now. And MAGA in our lives will know it, and that matters.